What's up, YouTube? My name is Kevin. If you're watching this, welcome to the channel. We're going to go over some Riftbound decks that you can pick up and start practicing online, whether through Pixelborn or Tabletop Simulator. The game's not out till October, but there have been some tournaments already. Now, mind you, there isn't really much of a meta because there's constantly stuff that's changing. But these are going to be some deck lists that I think are pretty easy to pick up if you want to learn the game on like a more intermediate level, along with some decks from these tournaments that have passed already. But really, I just kind of want to go over some trends that I've been noticing in terms of what people are prioritizing when playing certain champions and or leaders. Starting off with the Sett leader deck by King Louis TCG. Go check out his channel and his Twitter. His profile has been very helpful to me as someone who's been picking up this game as of just recently. All of the cards barely came out this past Friday, and you can play them on Pixelborn online to play against other people. So that's why he has an 86% win rate. With Sett the Boss as your legend, you're going to have an ability that lets you spend a buff to save your characters. Now, there's a lot of ways to gain a free buff in this deck. You have the Cloud Field, which is a 2-cost character, which says whenever you play another unit, you can buff her for free. Buffs don't stack, so you can only have one buff, so the most it'll be is 2 might, which is the overall power. But you also have other units in this deck, like 3 copies of Pit Rookie, which says when you play me, you can buff another character. This is very helpful with your 4 copies of Sett Kingpin right here. He's a pretty solid card. He's a 4-cost with 5 might character that has a tank ability, meaning that you're going to have to do damage to him first if your opponent is challenging. But you're also going to get +1 might for every buffed character in that battlefield, right? So if you're, I believe if you're at your base or a battlefield, if you have a buffed character there, he's going to become 6 might. And if he's buffed as well, he's going to become 7 might. So you can combo that off very well with your Cloud Field and Pit Rookies. You kind of control the game early on with those cards, or spam out some extra units with your Faithful Manufacturer with 3 cost. Or you also have other ways to buff your units with Arena Bar. You have Call to Glory, which can give your units +3 might, but you can spend the buff to play it for free. So when you're in the middle of a showdown, you can actually play this without having to spend any runes on the opposing turn. The 3 battlefields in this deck are Monastery, Obelisk of Power, and the Candlelit Sanctum. Candlelit Sanctum is pretty good. Every time you conquer there, whenever you move one of your units there, basically, you're going to be able to look at the top 2 cards of your deck and either put them to the bottom of your deck or keep them there. Very solid. I believe the Obelisk of Power is going to give you an extra rune at the start of the game. So this is pretty awesome. You're going to basically start the game with 3 runes instead of 2. If you're going first, and if you're going second, you actually start off with more. So it's a great way to set up a situation where you can play your Sett Kingpin out pretty early on and start using cards like Showstopper to move them to battlefields early. And the Monastery helps you use buff combos as well to draw cards, right? It says when you move a unit here, you can spend a buff to draw an extra card. So if you already have buffed units like the Cloud Field, or if you're buffing random stuff with your Arena Bar, then you're going to be able to move them for free here to draw some cards, spend those buffs, and really take advantage of all that value. But there's a couple different ways you can play this Sett leader. This is the 2nd place set list from the Riftbound Meta Weekly Tournament. Huge shout out to Riftbound Meta on Twitter and YouTube. Go check out their accounts and their channels for some more information on how to play tournaments for the game. But this deck looks a little bit different than the one we just looked at. This deck is going to be taking advantage of certain cards like Dazzling Aura, the Dead Bloom Predator, really big boss units like Harness Dragon, right? That's because Dazzling Aura is one of the most popular orange cards in the game, from what I can tell already. It's a 9 cost. But yeah, you do have to put 2 runes back into the deck when you play it, and it says at the end of the turn, you basically reveal cards off the top of your deck until you find a unit. You play that unit for free, ignoring its cost, and the rest of the cards get recycled to the bottom of the deck. And you have a lot of ways to ramp into this card. You have Catalyst of Aeons here. You have Mobilize as well, which will get you some exhausted runes. But you are still kind of playing off of that ability to buff your own characters. You can use cards like Showstopper, which is a 1-cost spell, but this 1-cost spell is going to let you grab any of your units at your base and move it to a battlefield for free and give it a buff. So if you play 3 of these, it's a very clean way to maybe buff up one of your tokens or maybe buff up one of your beefy characters, but you are playing 1 copy of your Sett champion. This is a 5-cost Sett. This one is a little bit different. On play, he's going to gain a buff, and you can spend his buff to give him +4 might. So he's going to be able to swing for 8 potentially, depending on how you set that up. But really what you're just trying to do with this deck is you want to move this Sett into a battlefield, or pretty much anybody with a buff, right? Move it to the battlefield. Whenever it gets into a showdown and it loses the showdown, you can use your leader ability and basically spend the buff, move it back into your base. Your character is never dying. That unit is never getting killed, which is really fun. It's a unit that's going to survive pretty much almost anything, any showdown is what it feels like. is a great starting legend if you really want to get into knowing how to play the game, because I feel like it's pretty slow paced compared to some of the other combo decks that are running around right now. Next up, we have Mindsplitters by Eevee. This is a Misfortune deck. You're going to use Misfortune as your leader legend, and you're going to also utilize the idea of this Dazzling Aura combo. Now, I didn't cover it too much in set because I really have been seeing this card be used more so in Misfortune whenever I'm playing online so far, and in a couple other orange leaders, right? But this is like the wombo combo that I see a lot of people utilizing. You're able to set this up by using Catalyst of Eons and Mobilize. Like I said earlier, both these cards are going to channel Exhausted Runes. Mobilize says channel 1 rune, it's 2 costs, and Eon says channel 2 runes. What's really cool is that if you can't channel any more runes, right, you're capped out, you just draw a card, so it just replaces himself, right? You don't play too many low-cost characters. The only low-cost character you're going to play is this 1 copy of the 4-cost Misfortune Buccaneer. This card is going to be your champion unit, so you're going to have it out of the deck anyways, and you can basically just slap this onto the battlefield. It's a pretty cool card, and your leader ability is going to give your units the ability to gank. It's going to give it ganking. You can move from battlefield to battlefield, so you don't necessarily have to worry about setting up too many characters in your base, which is really nice. And outside of that, the lowest cost unit you have is 5, starting with Carnivorous Snapvine. Then you have the Mindsplitters. You have the Dead Bloom Predators. These are going to be your boss characters that you're going to want to play off your Dazzling Aura. Now, like I said, once you get to the 9 rune threshold, you just want to start slapping on these Dazzling Auras. It's a gear, so it's going to stay on the board. There is a lot of gear removal. In fact, this deck plays 2 copies of Fading Memories. It's a 4-cost that says give a unit at a battlefield or a gear temporary, which basically says kill it at the start of the opposing turn. So the opponent isn't going to have necessarily the hardest time to get rid of your Dazzling Aura, especially if they're going to include cards in their sideboard for it. But if they don't draw those cards, at the end of your turn, you're going to reveal some of these big boss monsters to constantly play. And sometimes it takes a while for the opponent to find a card to play because they're playing so many spells in very little units, right? Because all the units are big bosses. On play with the Carnivorous Snapvine, you're going to force another enemy unit to basically challenge with you. That's going to be a 6 might into something potentially. You also have this Anivia Primal. When it attacks, you deal 3 damage to units here. There's a situation where you already have maybe your Dead Bloom Predator on a battlefield, so you can go ahead and slap this at the end of the turn on the battlefield too. And sometimes that's going to initiate a showdown, which is very interesting. Yeah, that's happened to me a lot of times. Dazzling Aura will trigger at the end of the turn, then a Dead Bloom Predator, which says you may play me on an occupied enemy battlefield. They'll just immediately play it on my battlefield, but it's the end of the turn already. You know what I mean? So I did not expect a showdown to go down in that scenario. And when all else fails, you can slap on your Soul Gorger, which is an 8 cost that says when you play me, you can play a unit from your trash ignoring its energy cost. But the cherry on top of this deck might be the ability to play 3 copies of Sabotage. This is a 1 cost spell that says choose an opponent, reveal their hand, choose a non-unit card, and recycle that card. So any potential cards that your opponent has in their hand that aren't units that are going to remove your gears, i.e. cards like Salvage or Fading Memories, you're going to be able to use Sabotage to just snipe out of their hands, which is going to potentially protect your Dazzling Aura strategy, which I really like in this deck. For battlefields, I'm not sure how important they are in this deck, but a lot of people seem to be playing Obelisk of Power overall, so we have 1 copy of that in here. We have the Vile Maw Lair, which says units can't move here from base. This is really good because if your opponent moves here, then they're not going to be able to move their unit out of this battlefield willingly unless they have ganking, right? But we can give any of our units ganking, right? So we can go ahead and just give any unit that's stuck there the ability to move from this battlefield to the next without having to worry about that. That's going to pair very well with our Legend Leader ability. The Aspirant's Climb, that's going to go ahead and make the game end at 9 points instead of 8, which is probably a lot better for you because I think you really want to play into the end game for this type of deck because you just want to be able to ramp into your aura, and once you get to the aura, you just want to keep resolving it over and over again. Moving on, we have a Kaisa deck by Freaks over here. This is actually another tournament deck list from that RIFTBOUND meta tournament that just passed. Kaisa has been definitely showing a lot of potential in the early games that I've been not only testing but seeing it be played. I really like the champion unit's ability. So it's a card that has Accelerate, so it's 4 cost, but you can pay an extra rune to give it the ability to Entered Ready, which is kind of like a rush ability if you've played any other card games, right? So that means you can immediately move her from your base onto a battlefield, and when you conquer that battlefield, you draw a card. So it's going to potentially replace itself 9 times out of 10 because you can just move it onto a battlefield immediately. Your leader, your legend ability, however, is very different. You can exhaust the legend, turn it sideways, and you add 1 power, which is like the universal rune. It's like the extra cost you have to pay when using many of your spells like Hextech Ray, Falling Star, Smokescreen. A lot of these make you pay the extra cost of needing to return a rune back into your rune deck, but your Kai'Sa is going to be able to minimize that cost just a little bit. You have some interesting battlefields that I haven't really gotten to test too much on Pixelborn because there's still some bugs that don't resolve, but Tarkin's Peak sounds very strong in theory. Whenever you conquer here, you ready 2 runes at the end of this turn. Very strong to combo off with your Kai'Sa champion unit because like we just said, you can immediately move her into this battlefield. At the end of your turn, you're going to have 2 runes ready to go, which means you can use certain spells on the opposing turn like the Hextech Ray or maybe something like Retreat, Stupefy, or Smokescreen. Fortify position is another battlefield that sees a lot of play right now. When a unit is defending here, that unit is going to gain 2 shield during this combat, so like 2 extra points of their might. And then Reaver's Row, when you defend here, you can move a friendly unit back into the base. This is actually pretty good because I think really what you're just trying to do is gain a little advantage with small points in the early game by moving your early characters like your Ravebloom student or your Legion Rearguard to gain some points. And in the mid game, as you progress, you really just want to use your constant removal spells to disrespect any units your opponent tries to play on you. And when it gets to that point where you're like at 6, 7 points and you just need to get to that 8th point, you can drop one of your Thousand-Tailed Watchers, which will let you accelerate onto a battlefield while simultaneously subtracting 3 might onto every opposing unit. But the cherry on top of this deck has to be the Acathian Rain. This card just reads like a custom card. It literally says, do this 6 times. Deal 2 damage to a unit. So you can deal 2 damage to 6 different units, or you can deal 12 damage to 1 unit or 6 damage to 2 units. The way you can split this up is actually really cool because it lets you basically diversify your portfolio in how much damage you're dealing across the board. So that's the name of the game with this deck. You're dealing damage with your spells and conquering the battlefields with your little guys. You do have some sideboard options in this version, which is really awesome to see because this was a tournament ready deck. It's looking like we had an extra copy of Singularity. I really like this card. It's a 6 cost spell that simply says deal 6 damage to up to 2 different units. I do believe you have to pick 2 different units. I don't think you can pick the same unit twice. That would be overpowered, but you got to put 2 runes back into your rune deck, which is a very hefty cost. But sometimes against some of the aggro decks, you know, like a Kai'Sa or a Jinx, you're going to want to have this Singularity on deck. Speaking of Jinx, here we have an aggro Jinx deck. Now, I do want to preface, I feel like before all the cards were released, the Jinx was kind of like the best deck. A lot of people were playing this or just talking about like how great this deck was, and it was very aggressive. So I do feel like if you are going to play this legend, you have to play it like an aggressive strategy, right? Especially because of this legend ability. It says at the start of your beginning phase, draw 1 if you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand. So I definitely think the idea of this leader is you want to have as little cards in hand as possible and as many cards on the board as possible, meaning either on the battlefield or in your base. That's why many of your characters synergize with this discard strategy. You have characters that say, when you discard me, you can pay a power rune of red to play me, right? So you got Flame Chompers here. It's a card that you can pretty much almost play for free most of the time, usually a 3/3, but instead you can actually just play this if it's discarded, and you have a lot of ways to discard this, like your champion Jinx unit. Awesome card. I love the art on this one, by the way. It's a 3 cost 4 might that says accelerate, has assault +2, which is when it's an attacker, it's going to gain +2 more strength, so it's going to swing for 6 actually. But when you play this unit, you got to discard 2 cards, but nothing too demanding when you have a lot of cards in your deck that synergize with this discard strategy, like Super Mega Death Rocket, a 4 cost spell that says deal 5 damage to a unit. Then, whenever you conquer, you can discard 1 card to return this card from your trash to your hand. This card is like infinitely recyclable, especially if you're just constantly conquering units with your characters that have Accelerate or your characters that entered ready, or maybe you're playing something like Darius. This is a 5 cost Darius that says when you play your second card this turn, give me +2 might, then ready me. So if you play Darius for 5, you can potentially play another card for 2 or 3 more runes, and then that Darius becomes readied. All of a sudden, he's a 7 might character that can swing on the turn he was played. So that combos off very nicely. So aside from dumping your hand so that you can use your leader ability, there's also some extra ways to take advantage of this, like the Immortal Phoenix. This card says when you kill a unit with a spell, you can pay 1 red rune to play me from your trash. Now, I do believe that's like the power ability, so you have to like return it into your deck. But being able to play a 3 cost from your trash for free, it sounds pretty broken, especially if you're comboing that off by killing a unit with a spell, right? So you're removing a unit with a spell while simultaneously playing a Immortal Phoenix for free every single time, and you're playing multiple copies of this card, right? So you can, if you have multiple multiple copies of Immortal Phoenix, you can trigger both and just play them in the stack and let them both fly on the board. You also have V. This is another champion unit, a 2 cost with 3 might that has ganking, so she can move from battlefield to battlefield, and says recycle 1 card from your trash, give me +1 might this turn. Very nice. So as you see, we've been dumping a bunch of characters, units, cards into our trash, and we can go ahead and start giving our V a bunch of might by recycling them. And because this is an aggro deck, we are playing some battlefields like the Arena's Greatest that says at the start of each player's first beginning phase, which is at the start of the first turn, that player gains 1 point. So we're actually going to be both starting at 1 point, and so we're only going to need about 7 more points to end the game, which is very fun. So you're playing an aggressive strategy, so you really want to end that game as quickly as possible. Next up, we have Yi. This is a green and orange leader. If you guys wanted to use the Calm rune and the Body rune, this is probably the leader for you. I like this ability. It says, while a friendly unit defends here alone, it gets +2 might. And this is going to combo off pretty well with your Grove God Willow, which says when you hold here, you can draw a card. So if you're able to control this first battlefield, being the Willow over here, then that means anytime your opponent hits you for a showdown, challenges one of your units at a battlefield, you're actually going to be the defending unit, giving your units +2 more might. More than likely, you're probably going to be holding this battlefield, which is going to help you trigger that ability. We also have the Dreaming Tree, which says the first time you choose a friendly unit here with a spell, you get to draw a card. And a lot of our spells in this deck, we play a lot of spells in this deck. A lot of our spells in this deck are going to be spells that target friendly units. As you can see, we have On Guard. This is a 1 cost reaction spell that says give a friendly unit +1 this turn, then an additional +1 if it's the only unit you control here. Very nice. This is going to be able to combo very nicely with your Stalwart Poro. He's a little 2 cost unit that gives himself +1 shield as a defender. So if he's defending, he's going to be a 3 might character instead. Oftentimes I see this comboed off with cards like On Guard or Discipline, a 2 cost spell that you can play anytime, even before spells or abilities resolve, that says give a unit +2. So you see the theme so far, right? We're constantly defending our units. You kind of want to get a unit on the battlefield and just leave them there forever. You're probably wondering, how do you get into showdowns if your main strategy is to defend? Well, you have spells like Charm. Playing 3 copies of this card because in my opinion, it's one of the best cards in green right now. It says move an enemy unit, right? So you can set up one of your big bodies like your champion unit, Master Yi, which has 6 might, by the way. And if your opponent doesn't want to necessarily engage in a showdown at that battlefield, then you can use Charm, move them into your own battlefield, and then you're probably going to end up winning that battlefield because they weren't expecting it. This deck is pretty cool because it does play around with that ability to move units around. You can also use Blitzcrank, which is a 5 cost unit. He has tank, so he has to be assigned damaged first. And when you play him into a battlefield, you can move an enemy unit into that battlefield. And when he's holding a battlefield, you can return him to the owner's hand. Very interesting. It's actually a mandatory effect. That's not an optional effect. If he's holding, you have to return him to your hand. But I really like Blitzcrank's ability. It's very on theme. Obviously, if you guys have played League of Legends, you know how Blitzcrank works. I haven't even played that game that much, to be honest, and I know how Blitzcrank works, so this is really cool to me. Play him on the battlefield, reel something in that's way cheaper than him, and engage in a showdown that they weren't asking for. I love that. Best card in this deck might have to be the Zanaya's Hourglass. This card, and in most green decks, whether you're playing Ari or this leader, whatever, this card is top tier. It's a gear that also has the hidden ability. It's a 2 cost, but it simply says the next time a friendly unit would die, kill this unit instead. Recall that unit as exhausted. This card is very, very strong. If you're constantly protecting your units already with this ability to bump up their shields, their might, while they're defending, you're gonna have to do it multiple times every time they have an Hourglass set up. This Hourglass is going to make a lot of these big body units very, very sticky. And personally, every time this card resolves more than once a game, I already start to get tilted. So I know it's a good card. Shout out Ghosty for this list, by the way. He's kind of legend. And last but not least, we have the first place list from that RIFTBOUND meta tournament. That was a 64-player tournament, by the way. And first place was this Viktor legend list piloted by Pochipoom. Huge shout out to you and RIFTBOUND meta for hosting these tournaments, and also the archive, I believe. Yes, the Piltover archive for having these deck lists. It really helps new players like myself kind of get into the game and understand a little bit more what to expect when playing the RIFTBOUND TCG. But let's quickly go over this deck. If you don't know what Viktor does, his leader ability is going to let you pay 1 rune. You got to exhaust him as well, but you get to play a free 1 recruit unit token. So that's basically the whole gist of the deck. You want to spam out recruit tokens as fast and as quickly as possible. We're playing Arena's Greatest, which is going to shorten the game a little bit because we're both going to start with an extra point. We have the War Camp, which gives our units +1 while they're here, which is going to turn all of our 1/1 units into 2 might units. Our champion Viktor is pretty cool. He has an ability that says when you play a card in an opponent's turn, you can play a 1 recruit token in your base. And we have a lot of spells that we can play on our opponent's turn, like Hidden Blade, Retreat, Smokescreen. Retreat is pretty cool. It's a 1-cost spell that lets you return a friendly unit to its owner's hand, which will let you utilize on-play abilities over and over again, while also giving the owner an extra rune exhausted. So it's a great way to channel runes if you want to keep your resources high, while also being able to trigger your on-play abilities multiple times. Maybe you want to use your Vanguard Captain more than once, right? You can bounce this back to the hand, and later on you can, or even in the same turn, you can play this 3-cost unit that says, when you play me, play 2 1 you might recruit tokens here, but you only get this effect if you've played another card this turn. But it's a combo. It's kind of a combo you can use, right? And we're also playing 3 copies of Cruel Patron. This is a 4-cost character. This is a 4-cost unit, but it has 6 might. It's a pretty overstated card, which I like, but as an additional cost, you're going to have to pop one of your own friendly units, but you're constantly generating free units with your leader ability anyway, so this cost isn't too hefty in this deck. Hidden Blade is a very strong card in many order rune / yellow decks. A lot of the yellow decks are probably going to be playing 2 to 3 copies of Hidden Blade, because oftentimes this is kind of a card that seals the deal. It's going to be able to kill any unit at a battlefield. So if you're holding for that last point and your opponent's going to swing big, you can just make sure you have at least 2 runes to spare, or maybe you set it up as a hidden card and you can use this to just, kill a unit when it's at the battlefield. The challenge never even goes off. The showdown just kind of cancels at that point, and it's a very clean way to win the game. But if you don't have Hidden Blade, you have another very strong 2-cost spell in this deck. Again, more spells you can activate on the opponent's turn. This is Siphon Power. It's exclusive to the Viktor leader, and it says reaction. Play anytime before spells and abilities, so you can play this whenever. It says choose a battlefield, give friendly units here +1 might. The other opposing units here, however, they get -1 might this turn to a minimum of 1. So with all the tokens you have, you're generating constantly, with your leader ability, with your Vanguard Captains, etc., you can go ahead and start moving them to these battlefields, and you're going to be able to make them very strong and make your opponent's characters very weak when they're engaged in these showdowns. And as the game progresses, you can also keep utilizing your 1-cost units. Maybe you want to play Commander Lidros, which is going to be able to lower his extra power cost for every other unit you killed on play. So let's say you have 4 tokens just sitting there, they're 1 might tokens. You can play this 6-cost, and normally you'd have to put 4 runes back into your deck, the yellow runes, right? But instead you can pop your 4 units and just play him for the 6-cost, which that he is. You have Machine Evangel, which has a pretty cool ability that says play 3 1 might recruit tokens into your base, and this ability triggers when it dies. So if it's gonna get killed in a showdown, you're gonna be able to play 3 units afterward, and maybe even combo it off with your Grand Stratagem. This card is very strong as well. It's a 6-cost spell for yellow that says give friendly units +5 this turn. So this is going to be able to almost guarantee you successfully win any showdown, or you can even play it on your turn before a showdown begins to bump up all of your units and just move them into a battlefield to pretty much guarantee you're going to conquer that battlefield, right? That's going to be all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys are still watching, be sure to hit like, comment, and subscribe because it'll support the channel. I'm going to put the link in the description for all of these decks down below, so if you just want to copy and paste them, check them out, you can actually just export them directly into Pixelborn so you can start playing them and practicing them immediately. Like I said before, this isn't necessarily a meta video because we don't have a Riftbound meta yet, but these are for sure trends and strategies that I'm already seeing being popularized in the game space. There's a lot of legends that I haven't even tried myself, but as I do, I'll make more videos, so stick around because this isn't the only video I'm going to make. There's a lot of legends that I think people are sleeping on, actually. Lux, Ari, I think a lot of these are really good still. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below of the Riftbound TCG. Are you guys playing? Are you guys deck building? What do you think of these deck lists? Do you think these decks could be better? Where are you guys playing? I know some of us are playing on Tabletop Simulator. I'm personally streaming on Pixelborn, on Twitch, and on YouTube, so be sure to stay tuned for those as well. But Riftbound does not come out till October, so we do have a ways to go. But until then, we'll see you next time.